A mistake of my youth. The room laughed. My ears rang. My fingers twitched. And for 5 seconds I forgot how to breathe. She didn't know the microphone was still on. Standing up there in front of hundreds of colleagues, a flute of champagne in one hand and her award in the other, she just finished her big thank you speech, all smiles, fake tears, the whole charade. But then someone handed her another glass. She leaned toward a woman in a green dress and, thinking the mic was off, casually dropped that sentence into the air like it meant nothing. Dorian was just a mistake of my youth. Another sip. Another laugh. The woman beside her whispered something and Clarice added, "No, seriously. I was a different person then. I wanted stability, not. I don't know, real passion. You know how it is." Except the room hadn't stopped listening. Because the mic was still on. That's when the laughter died. And all eyes started turning. Not toward her. Toward me. I was sitting at table 14 next to the chocolate fountain, halfway through a forkful of undercooked steak. 1 second I was clapping for my wife's Marketing Excellence Award, and the next, I was the punchline to her personal TED Talk about regret. That silence, that thick, dreadful silence, spread like spilled ink. Even the music cut out. Her boss leaned forward. Someone near me muttered, "Did she just say that?" I didn't move. I didn't blink. I couldn't even hear the rest of what she said. I was too busy listening to every beat of my own pulse. She never apologized. Not then. Not after. Not once. She just smiled awkwardly, tapped the mic, and said, "Oops," with a stupid little shrug. People laughed again, nervously this time, like maybe they'd all misheard. Maybe it wasn't a big deal. Maybe it was just a joke. It wasn't. Because she'd said it before. In private. In anger. During fights. During silences. But never out loud. Never into a microphone. Never where my colleagues and her boss and the event photographer and the guy slicing the prime rib could hear it. That was the night I realized something important. She'd never been afraid of losing me. Because deep down she believed she already had. What happened an hour later only confirmed it. But we'll get to that. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't storm out or make a scene or tap a spoon against a champagne glass and give some dramatic speech of my own. I just sat there. Perfectly still. While the ballroom struggled to pretend nothing had happened. Clarice, ever the actress, slipped off the stage with a smile so polished it could have been carved. She navigated the awkward applause like it was part of the plan. I watched as people avoided looking at me. No one said a word. And that silence, that awful, ringing, civilized silence, felt louder than 1,000 microphones. She didn't return to our table. Not once. Instead, she drifted to a different group near the back of the room, her posture relaxed, her laughter back on schedule. You'd think she just pulled off a dazzling bit of improv and the whole oops was nothing but a quirky Clarice moment. But I knew her. I knew the way her eyes darted when she was stalling. I knew the way her fingers fidgeted with the stem of her glass when she was trying to keep herself from blurting something worse. So I sat. I watched. I waited. About 20 minutes later, while the dessert platters were making the rounds and people were swaying to soft jazz, I saw her slip out the side door. Alone, at first. Or so I thought. I waited 60 seconds, just long enough not to look suspicious, and then I followed. The hallway outside was dim, lit by wall sconces and the distant hum of an ice machine. I walked quietly, slower than I've ever walked in my life, like each footstep might snap the whole illusion wide open. At the end of the corridor was a door marked "Staff Access Only." It was cracked slightly open. And through it I heard her voice again. Not laughing this time. Low. Intentional. Controlled. "Are you sure no one saw you?" she asked. A man's voice replied. "I didn't recognize it. They're all drunk. Besides, your husband's not exactly paying attention." My heart felt like it had relocated to my throat. I edged closer. Slowly. Carefully. I could barely breathe. Then came Clarice again, this time sharper, with something in her tone I hadn't heard in years, excitement. "An hour. That's all we need. I told you he'll be gone before he even notices I left." "Gone?" the man asked. She laughed. "Emotionally? Please. He was never really here." They both laughed this time. Together. Warmly. Intimately. And then came the sound of fabric. Not the kind from a hug. Something else. Something closer. I didn't stay. I didn't need to see it. I turned around and walked quickly but quietly back toward the ballroom. My vision felt narrowed, like the edges of the world were folding in. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if I might pass out. I stopped near the elevators and gripped the metal railing on the wall just to stay grounded. Back inside, people were dancing now. Some laughing, some stumbling. The music had shifted to upbeat retro tracks. and a group of coworkers was chanting some inside joke about one of the interns. Everything felt fake. Absolutely everything. When Clarice returned 45 minutes later, her hair slightly out of place and a faint flush on her cheeks, she walked past me like I was part of the decor. She didn't stop, didn't speak, just went to the table, downed what was left in her glass, and smiled at a passing executive like she hadn't just disappeared with a stranger behind a locked service door. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't, because here's the most painful part of it all. More painful than what I heard, or what I saw, or what I suspected before that night. I think I already knew. I think I've always known. And I let it happen anyway. She didn't speak a word on the way home. And neither did I. We drove in silence, city lights washing across her face like flashes of fading truth. She looked out the window the whole ride, absently rubbing her wrist where she'd once worn the bracelet I gave her on our 5th anniversary. She never noticed I was watching her reflection in the glass. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Both possibilities made my stomach twist. When we got home, she grabbed her bag and disappeared into the bathroom without even a glance in my direction. I stood there in the dark hallway, my hand still resting on the doorknob, like I wasn't sure I had actually walked inside. Everything felt too quiet, too clean, too controlled. I didn't go to bed. I didn't even take off my shoes. I just sat on the edge of the living room couch and stared at the black screen of the television, watching the faint ghost of my reflection. A man who looked like me but hollowed out. At some point, Clarice passed through the hallway and mumbled something like, "Night." But it wasn't for me. It was the kind of word you throw over your shoulder when the person it's aimed at doesn't matter anymore. She closed the bedroom door behind her. That's when I stood up. I didn't plan to do anything. I swear I didn't. But my legs were moving before my brain could veto the idea. I walked into her office. She had converted our spare room into a sleek little home workspace during the pandemic. All minimalist decor, chrome desk legs, houseplants she kept forgetting to water. The laptop was open and unlocked. Maybe she thought I'd be asleep, or maybe she thought I wouldn't dare look. Either way, her arrogance was my invitation. There was a folder on the desktop labeled Q4_campaign assets. Harmless enough. But when I clicked it open, what I found wasn't logos or spreadsheets or presentations. It was screenshots, dozens of them, of text messages. From her phone. They weren't just from the man in the gray suit, though there were plenty from him, too. There were others. Men I'd never heard of. Names I didn't recognize. The kind of flirty, intimate language you only use with someone who knows your body. Some were short exchanges. Others were entire threads. Flirty, romantic, raunchy, but always casual. Like betrayal was just another part of her schedule. Then I found the folder within the folder. Confidential docs. My stomach dropped. I opened it. Inside were PDFs of apartment listings. Studio lofts. 1-bedrooms. Out of state. Most were marked with highlights or notes like, "Good light," or "Gym included." There were 2 rental applications partially filled in. The co-signer's name on both? Aaron Delroy, the man in the gray suit. I backed away from the desk like it was burning me. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just one night. She was planning an exit. An actual orchestrated escape from our life. But the worst part, the part one hadn't even realized until I looked at the dates on the files, was that she had started preparing this months ago. While I was researching anniversary getaways. While I was meal prepping for her. While I was cutting back on groceries to surprise her with that stupid espresso machine she said she wanted but didn't need. She was already drawing the map to leave me behind. I closed the laptop. I stood in the dark for a long time. Then I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, though my throat still felt dry after drinking it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch a wall or knock over a chair. I just stood there, holding the glass with both hands like a man trying to convince himself he still had control over something. At around 3:17 a.m., I went into the bedroom. She was asleep, curled to one side, breathing steady, peaceful. I sat in the chair across from the bed and watched her sleep. And all I could think was, I wonder if she dreams of me, or if I've already been erased there too. By the time Clarice woke up, I had already prepared coffee, packed her lunch, and left the morning news playing on low volume in the kitchen. I don't know why I did all that. Habit, maybe? Muscle memory. Or maybe I wanted to see if she could still lie to my face while sipping coffee I made with hands that trembled the entire time. She walked into the kitchen looking as if she hadn't shattered the foundation of our marriage less than 8 hours ago. Hair tied back, white robe cinched tight, phone in one hand, her expression unreadable behind her sleepy smile. "You're up early," she said, like I was just another piece of her comfortable routine. I nodded. Couldn't sleep. She didn't ask why. She sat down at the table and checked her emails while sipping from the mug I had placed carefully on the coaster, just like I always did. I watched her eyes flick back and forth across the screen, waiting for something, anything that resembled guilt. But there was nothing. No shift in her body language. No twitch. Not even a hesitation when she glanced up and asked, "You doing okay?" in that hollow, polite tone people use with coworkers they barely know. I stared at her for a second longer than I should have. I wanted to say something. Wanted to ask her what kind of person keeps planning breakfast with the man she's planning to abandon. But all I said was fine. It was a lie, of course. But so was everything else in that house. After she left for work, I stayed behind and opened every drawer in that office. I don't know what I thought I'd find. Love letters? Confessions? A hidden key to the life she was building without me? There was nothing, just more silence, more evidence of her careful erasure of our life together. But tucked behind a stack of unused branded folders was a receipt from a boutique hotel. Dated 2 weeks prior. One night, deluxe suite, room service. No name listed on the guest log, but the card was hers. Our joint account. I hadn't even noticed the charge. I sat on the edge of the bed that afternoon, holding the receipt like it might bleed if I squeezed it hard enough. And then something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't spiral. I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my brother, Carter. He picked up on the third ring, and when he heard my voice, he immediately said, "What's wrong? Can I come by?" I asked. "No small talk, huh?" he said, but his voice softened. "Yeah. Come over. Now? I'll be there in 20. His apartment was small, cluttered with guitars and coffee mugs and the lingering scent of microwave burritos, but it felt more real than anything in my own house. We sat on his worn couch and I told him everything. Not just about the award ceremony or the mic or the man in the shadows. I told him about the folder on the laptop, the leases, the texts, the hotel, all of it. Carter didn't interrupt. Not once. He just listened with this look on his face, like he was watching someone disappear in front of him and didn't know how to stop it. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "So what are you gonna do?" "I don't know. You can't stay." "I know. But you're going to." I nodded slowly. "Not forever. Just, not yet." Carter shook his head. "She doesn't love you, Dorian." "I know. You're not even in the picture anymore." I looked down at my hands. "I think I just want to see how it ends." He didn't understand. I don't think I did either. But something in me had gone quiet, not broken, not numb, just still. Like I was inside the eye of a hurricane waiting for the other side to hit. That night, I went home before Clarice returned. I made dinner. I played the role. And when she kissed me lightly on the cheek like nothing had changed, I smiled. Because I knew something she didn't. She thought she had buried the truth so well. But I had found the edges of the map. And I was ready to start digging. The first thing I did was make a copy of everything. Flash drive. Cloud backup. Printed copies in a sealed envelope I stored inside an old box of tax returns, the one she never touches because numbers bore her. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I wasn't even sure what I was planning. All I knew was that I didn't trust myself to trust her anymore, and I needed evidence for when, not if everything fell apart. The next week was a rehearsal. That's the best way I can describe it. I went through the motions of my old life, but it all felt staged. Rehearsed. Like I was reciting lines I didn't believe in anymore. Wake up. Make coffee. Ask how she slept. Pretend to listen. Pretend to laugh. Pretend to forget. And Clarice? She leaned into the role of loving wife like she was auditioning for a part in her own alibi. She started texting me during the day again. Sending little emojis. Photos of her salad at lunch. A silly meme once. It was surreal. She wasn't trying to fix anything, she was trying to cover something. And it worked. To the outside world, we probably looked better than ever. But I knew what was behind it. That smile? I had seen the same one in a screenshot sent to someone else at 1:14 a.m. followed by, "I miss you already." What she didn't know was that I'd stopped deleting her phone backups from our shared iCloud account. She hadn't changed the settings. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she thought I wasn't smart enough to check. Maybe she was just careless. But every night after she fell asleep, I synced the backup to an old phone of mine and watched her day unfold in reverse. Her texts with Aaron weren't the worst. What rattled me were the messages to her best friend, Lynn. They weren't about me exactly, not at first. They were about logistics. About exit plans. About how to keep him calm. About how it'll be cleaner if he thinks it's his decision. That's what did it. Cleaner. Like I was a stain to be managed. Something inside me, something I thought had already broken, began to sharpen. I stopped feeling sad. I stopped even feeling betrayed. I started feeling surgical. Focused. So I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I called in sick to work. It felt foreign, dialing the number and lying to the department head. I mumbled something about a virus, promised I wouldn't fall behind on grading, and hung up before he could ask too many questions. Then I waited until Clarice left, kissed me on the forehead like I was a docile pet, and skipped out the front door. I followed her. I know how that sounds. I do. I hated every second of it. But I had to know if what I suspected was real or just something I built in my head. She didn't go to her office. She didn't even go to the gym like she sometimes claimed on Wednesdays. She went to a nondescript, short-term rental building in the next city over. Not far. 20 minutes. Far enough to keep a double life, but close enough for convenience. I parked across the street and waited. 10 minutes later, Aaron pulled up in a silver sedan. She buzzed him in without hesitation. That was it. Proof again. And not just of the affair. Of the planning. The coordination. The comfort. You don't meet someone midweek at a short-term rental unless it's no longer exciting, it's routine. But the most chilling moment was when I saw her open the window. She stood there, silhouetted by cheap blinds, sipping from a coffee cup, wearing a robe I'd never seen. I stared at her from the other side of the street, trying to understand how someone you once shared dreams with could become such a stranger so fast. She looked peaceful. I looked invisible. I drove home without thinking. My hands moved on the wheel like they belonged to someone else. When I got inside, I opened her wedding album. Not because I missed her. Because I needed to see if I'd imagined it all, the beginning, the softness in her eyes, the girl who once cried during vows. But even in the photos, there was something I hadn't noticed before. A distance. Like part of her already knew how the story would end. That night, Clarice came home humming. She tossed her heels into the hallway like a teenager and walked straight into the kitchen. I was already there, stirring soup. "I've got news," she said. I didn't turn around. "Oh yeah?" She walked up behind me and slipped her arms around my waist. I flinched, but she didn't notice. New positions opening up. Regional lead. They hinted it's mine if I want it. "Sounds like they're rewarding loyalty," I said. She laughed. "Maybe they're just finally noticing who actually makes things run." I smiled and stirred the soup. Because now I knew how this needed to go. She thought she was writing the ending. But I'd already started rewriting the third act, and in my version, I didn't beg her to stay. I dared her to leave. 2 days later, I started setting traps. Not the kind you see in movies, no voice recorders or surprise confrontations. No dramatic emails sent to her boss. Just small, intentional changes. Quiet edits to the script of our day-to-day life. And I watched carefully to see how she responded when the walls began to shift around her. The first thing I did was stop answering her texts immediately. I used to reply within minutes, maybe even seconds, like I was on call for her emotions. But now I waited. Sometimes 20 minutes. Sometimes 2 hours. Other times, not at all. And that's when it started, the first crack. She asked if I was okay. Twice. I said I was just busy. Which wasn't a lie. I was very busy. Planning. The second thing I changed was the way I touched her. Clarice had gotten used to small gestures, a hand on her lower back when passing by, a morning forehead kiss, a comforting squeeze on her shoulder. I removed all of it. Completely. I wasn't cruel. I didn't ice her out or treat her with open hostility. I just stopped giving her warmth she didn't earn. That's when the second crack formed. One night, she leaned in to kiss me and I turned slightly, letting her lips land on the edge of my cheek. She blinked. Didn't say anything. But her smile faltered just for a second before she pretended not to notice. She was noticing. I knew she was. Then came the dinner party. It was a last-minute thing. Her boss was hosting a small evening at his home for senior staff and spouses. When Clarice asked me to come with her, I almost said no. But I saw the hesitation in her eyes, a flicker of fear, and I realized she needed me to show up for the image, not the intimacy. So I agreed. She wore a black satin dress. She looked like the Clarice I once knew, only sharpened now, glossier, colder, more expensive somehow. She smiled as we arrived, introduced me to people I'd never heard of, and leaned into my arm like we were still in love. But I had done my homework. Two of the men at that party? She had texted both of them the week before. Friendly mostly, but not too friendly. Still, I noticed how their eyes lingered when they looked at her, and how her smile changed ever so slightly when she returned their gaze. Midway through the evening, Clarice stepped into the kitchen with one of them. Jeff, I think his name was. Balding. Wedding ring. Something about him made my skin crawl. I followed quietly and leaned against the hallway arch just out of view. I couldn't hear much. Just murmurs. Then laughter. Then the sudden drop in tone when Clarice said, and I remember this clearly, "It's not much longer, I promise." It hit me like a slap. Not if. Not maybe. It's not much longer. That meant a date had been set. The end was in motion. After the party, on the way home, she asked what I thought. I said the wine was average and the steak was overdone. She laughed, then asked if I noticed how Jeff kept flirting with her. I said nothing. She tried to pry more, poking my shoulder, teasing me. "You jealous?" she asked. I glanced over at her and replied, "Should I be?" For the first time in weeks, she had no response. She looked out the window. The rest of the drive was silent. The next day, I scheduled an appointment at a storage facility across town. Under a fake name. Paid 6 months in advance. I began quietly removing small things from the house. One box at a time. Things that were mine. Family heirlooms. Photos. Personal documents. A few keepsakes. Nothing she'd miss immediately. I kept it all neat, organized, invisible. Like I was preparing for a disappearance I hadn't announced. Then I opened a new checking account in my name only. I didn't touch our joint account. Not yet. But I began diverting my direct deposits there. Slowly. Quietly. All while keeping my expressions soft, my words gentle, my questions minimal. I needed her to stay comfortable, not suspicious. But it was working. She began watching me more closely now, but with uncertainty. She couldn't read me the way she used to. And Clarice hated not knowing. One night she asked, "Is everything okay between us?" I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" She searched my face like she was trying to find a crack in my mask. But mine wasn't cracking. It was solidifying. Because now, for the first time in years, I wasn't acting. I was becoming exactly the man she didn't realize she should have feared from the beginning. It was a Tuesday morning when it happened, the kind of morning that tries to pretend it's normal. She made toast. I poured coffee. The light came in through the kitchen window in that usual golden slice. But under it all, something felt off. Not from me. From her. Clarice looked tired. Not physically, she always took immaculate care of herself, but there was something restless behind her eyes. Her fingers tapped the edge of her phone screen as she scrolled without absorbing anything. She'd been more jumpy lately, less composed. Her sentences started trailing off more often. The charm was still there, but the control was slipping. I could tell she was beginning to feel the unease I'd planted. That invisible kind of pressure, the one that doesn't make you explode, but slowly, precisely, forces you to doubt everything you once dismissed. She must have sensed my silence meant more than usual. Maybe she thought I knew something. Maybe she wondered if I'd seen the rental agreement sitting in her coat pocket last night, the one with the tentative move-in date scrawled in pen. Or maybe it was nothing specific at all. Sometimes guilt just needs silence to find its voice. And that morning it did. She said something. Not loudly. Not with drama. Just slipped it into the air like a crack too small to notice at first. "I don't know what version of me you fell in love with," she muttered, still looking at her phone. I didn't answer right away. I waited. Because that wasn't an invitation, it was a confession. When I finally spoke, my voice was flat. The one who pretended to care. She blinked. Once. Then went back to scrolling. But her hand shook slightly. That was the first time I saw real fear in her. Not fear of me. I would never hurt her. But fear of losing control of the story she'd been writing behind my back. By Friday, she was spiraling. She started asking where I was going. She began randomly checking in with texts during the day, using little excuses. "Just checking if you fed the cat?" Or, "Did you see that weather alert?" She never used to do that. Clarice had always been surgical in her distance. Now she was clumsy with attention. Like she was trying to sew closed a wound she hadn't even noticed was bleeding. That's when I made my first real move. I left a printed copy of her own rental agreement on the kitchen table. Not folded. Not hidden. Just there. She came home late that night. Later than usual. Hair slightly tousled. Keys jingling a little too loudly, as if she needed to announce her return. She saw the paper within seconds. Stopped. Read it. Didn't touch it. Didn't speak. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book I had no intention of remembering. Her voice was almost a whisper. Where did you get this? I looked up slowly, closed the book and said, You left it in your coat pocket. She hesitated, then made a mistake. It's for work. I tilted my head. Your work needs you to relocate into a one-bedroom loft with someone named Aaron Delroy? That was the first time she actually flinched. There was a long pause, the kind where everything around you continues, but you're no longer in the same room as time. She swallowed and forced her expression back into something neutral. You went through my stuff. No, I replied calmly. You left your truth where it could be seen. I just stopped pretending not to look. She sat down slowly across from me. Something in her had shifted, the confidence was still there, but it was eroding. I could see her assessing me now like I was no longer her husband, but a variable in a plan that suddenly felt less airtight. Are you planning to leave me? She asked, tone level strategic. I didn't blink. Shouldn't I be the one asking that? And then, she did something I didn't expect. She laughed. A short, humorless sound. Not cruelty, more like disbelief. Or maybe the last gasp of the narrative she'd worked so hard to control. You know, she said, looking past me now, I really thought you'd fall apart. I nodded once. I know. I thought you'd beg. Or scream. Maybe cry. I know. And now I don't even know what you're thinking. I met her eyes and said, That's the point. She looked away. She was unraveling now. Slowly. Beautifully. And I didn't need to raise my voice or pack a bag or make a dramatic exit. She was the one who brought the storm. I was just learning how to walk through it without flinching. Clarice didn't sleep that night. I know because I didn't either. I could hear her shifting in bed, the occasional sound of her phone lighting up, the creak of the floor when she got up at 3:12 a.m. and stood by the window for over an hour. Maybe she was waiting for me to say something. Maybe she wanted me to yell, to release the pressure. But I didn't. I just let the silence speak for both of us. By morning, something had changed in the air. It wasn't dramatic. There was no slam of a door, no suitcases at the curb. Just stillness. And then motion. She made breakfast. 2 eggs, coffee, toast. As if that ritual might undo everything that came before. I sat at the table. Ate. She sat across from me and waited. Finally, she said, You're not going to stop me, are you? I looked up at her. Really looked at her. This woman I once adored. This stranger sitting across from me now. And I said, No. You stopped yourself a long time ago. Her shoulders sank, and for a second, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Clarice had always been a master of composure. She reached into her bag, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table. It's the lease, she said. I signed it yesterday. Move-ins next week. I nodded. I know. You already packed some things. Yes. Then I guess this is it. There was no malice in her voice. No defiance. Just truth. For once, the mask was gone. She stood, walked over to the hallway, paused, and then, as if she knew she'd never see me again, she said something I'll remember forever. I didn't hate you. I just forgot how to love you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She left the house quietly. No dramatic exit. No theatrics. Just the soft sound of the door clicking shut. And then, for the first time in months, stillness that didn't feel like waiting. Felt like peace. That weekend, I moved the rest of my things into a small cabin I'd found near the edge of town. Nothing fancy. 2 rooms, worn floorboards, windows that actually opened. I started teaching my astronomy class remotely for a while, just to clear my head. I hung pictures I'd forgotten I loved. I bought a second-hand telescope and set it up on the back porch. Some nights I sit outside with a cup of tea and just watch. Not for answers. Not for closure. Just the sky. It's funny, after everything, the one thing I missed most was quiet. Not the silence of tension, not the cold space between people pretending, but real quiet. The kind that wraps around you and says, you're safe now. It's over. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not heartbroken. I'm not waiting for her to call. I don't need to. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rebuilding. And doing it so quietly they have no idea what peace looks like without them.